Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to the She Can Ball podcast. I'm your host, Mahi Jariwala. Today we're joined by Meghan Mcpeak, the play-by-play announcer for the Washington Mystics. Before we get into it, I want to thank Keto Crisp by Can Do for sponsoring today's episode. Keto Crisp protein bars only have 4 grams of carbs and 2 grams of sugar with 10 grams of protein. I keep these in my basketball and school bag because they make the perfect snack. What I love most about these bars is how good they taste. One of my favorite flavors is almond butter chocolate chip, and it literally tastes like a chocolate chip cookie. I'm an almond butter lover, so these bars just really hit home for me, but don't take my word for it. Try some yourself by going to tastecando.com and use code SheCanBall for 15% off your purchase. Okay, so let's get into it. So just tell us about your childhood and how you got interested into broadcasting.
So I actually played basketball growing up and played through high school, through college. And it was college that I decided to change from my interest in being a strength and conditioning coach to the broadcasting side of things. And kind of just went from there. Growing up in Canada, we didn't really see many women in sports on the broadcasting side of things, unless we were lucky enough to, once in a while get some footage from ESPN and see the likes of, Robin Roberts, Hannah Storm on television. And then just with her emergence in the NBA in Doris Burke. So they were kind of the 3 that I knew growing up in sports broadcasting. And that's kind of where I realized that women could do it because, like I said, in Canada it was predominantly male. And, you add in the fact that there wasn't really many women that looked like me, if at all, on the Canadian side. So it was actually the US side that I saw a lot more people that look like me. And that's kind of just where it went from there. And just thinking that I wanted to prepare myself for a post-playing career because I had the hopes of playing professionally, but other circumstances didn't allow that to happen. So that plan was actually expedited to as soon as I graduated college, and it kind of just went from there.
Yeah, you talk about playing basketball. I mean, when did your love for basketball kind of first arise?
Probably when I was younger. I have an older brother, and I, like most younger siblings, wanted to be like him. So anything he wanted to do, I wanted to do it as well. I was the annoying little sister who followed him everywhere. And, if I wanted to play with him and his friends, he's 4 years older than me. So if I want to play with him and his friends, I had to know the rules and I had to understand that I couldn't go crying to mom if something happened that I didn't like. So, if I got hit hard or pushed, I had to either go cry to mom and never be able to play again with him and his friends, or suck it up and just understand that, you're playing with older kids, boys or girls, didn't matter to him. And, I'm smaller, so things are going to happen. And then my best friend that I grew up with, I was, taller than most kids at our age. So she was like, you should try out for, our basketball team and see what happens. And it kind of just went from there. And I haven't looked back since.
And what was your experience playing college basketball?
So the Canadian system is much different than the US system. The emphasis is not as much heavily on the athlete side of things. It's more so on the academic side of things, from my experience. So when you have the term student athlete, they really truly look at it as student first and then athlete. Unlike what we know as, the NCAA and the powerhouse that it is. But it was fun, getting to travel and play basketball and continue playing the sport that I loved was, nothing to complain about. And getting to meet different people was really fun as well too. And it allowed me to be able to meet people in the sports media world in the Canadian side of things, specifically with the Toronto Raptors, because a lot of the times visiting NBA opponents would need, a place to practice if they came in early for a game. And my school was not far from the airport. So it worked out that our gym would usually be used for teams to practice and work out because we had, 3 giant courts set up. So it allowed them to have the space that they needed. So getting to meet different NBA teams and different NBA players was pretty cool as a college player. And then also to every summer, we would be the host site for the Raptors Basketball Academy, which is like their summer camp. So seeing the kids come in and learn the game of basketball, but also to different people from different sectors of the Toronto Raptors organization allowed me to meet them and kind of just get, an eye level view of what the NBA is like, unlike from what we see as fans.
And then what did you kind of really start to getting interested into like the field of broadcasting specifically?
So I'm very, very lucky that I went to school for something that I enjoy doing, and two, graduated and am actually working in the field that I went to school for. Because I have a lot of friends that, for example, went to school for marketing and they're working in nothing that has to do with marketing, or stuff like that. So I was very lucky in that sense that I was able to find work within the field that I went to school for, but also too, I was able to find work basically right after graduating, which in the media world is not really consistent. I wouldn't say it's unheard of, but at that time, because we're going back, a decade, it was a little bit unheard of to graduate and immediately be doing something that you wanted to do and wanted to strive to do. So I was very lucky in that sense that, I graduated and 6 months later, I was doing play-by-play and, color analysts on a consistent basis, as well to, our program at Humber, they have their own radio station. So it also was like in school, we were on air. So a very well-respected program in Canada, and set their students up for a lot of success.
And then like, moving along like your broadcasting career, I mean, how do you think you got your foot in that door? Because like you said, it is hard, especially with media and with limited opportunities. Like, and not always having that representation. I mean, what pushed you to kind of keep going?
Yeah, I think Mahi, the biggest thing is, like, as much as I hate it because it's just my personality, is networking. And I'm the generation that grew up pre-internet, and then when the internet first started, and then what we know the internet as right now, whereas your generation only knows what we know the internet
Yeah.
as right now. So I had to learn how to network kind of both ways. And when I was in school, like Twitter and Facebook just started. So one, that tells you how old I am. And two, it was, it wasn't so much as a comfort level for people back then to like network via social media because it was still so new. Whereas now, you tweet something out. I mean, you saw the Twitter campaign of, the manifesting campaign that they just started promoting, of like people tweeting something, 5-10 years ago,
Yeah.
and then eventually it comes true. So like when Twitter and Facebook first started, that wasn't necessarily like a common thing to do. So trying to reach out to people via Twitter or Facebook was still, relatively new. So there wasn't that comfort level that you see today. So just reaching out and connecting with people that way, who were in the sports media landscape, both in the US and in Canada, and just utilizing those relationships and cultivating those relationships to put me in a position where, I could continue to, build my broadcasting career. I don't want to say brand, because I don't do it for like the brand stuff, but I understand also too, as a, on-air talent, you do have your own brand, but it was more so just trying to cultivate those relationships to put me in a position where if something became open, I would be top of mind for people. And, I think that I did a really good job of doing that because my opportunity in the Canadian Pro League, and then my opportunity first in the G League with the 905, stemmed from those relationships that I cultivated with two separate people, but both utilizing the relationships I had with them to be able to put myself in a position to, one, interview, and two, successfully get the job. So as much as networking can be, a little bit terrifying at some points, but also frustrating it can also, work really well for people in different situations.
Like, what advice do you have for networking and making those connections? Because I know, like, coming from Canada, it must be harder to be in that kind of more limited sports scene as there's not as much going on as there is here in the US.
Yeah, you look at the Canadian landscape, and it's limited in the sense of how many teams they have, how
Yeah.
many networks they have. It's not the same as, here in the US. But that is also why I made sure to try and network with people who are both Canadian and American on both sides of the border. Because I've always had the dream of wanting to be in the US and work in the US in the sports world and in sports media. So I knew that I needed to make sure I was cultivating relationships with people on both sides. And, as much as I say I get frustrated networking, I know how important it is. The biggest thing I would say is it has to be authentic, because people within the industry, whether it's fellow out on air talent, or it's network executives or team executives, people who are the decision makers, they understand when someone new is reaching out to them that it's most likely a networking situation. But if you can also be authentic with them and just try to get to know them on an authentic level, the relationship is cultivated much more organically, as opposed to forcing it. I never try to force networking conversations with people. I never try to force a relationship on someone in this industry, because I don't want them to feel like I'm just trying to use them, because that's not at all what I'm doing. So I always try to make sure that it's organic and stuff like that. So for me, an authentic and organic cultivated relationship for me goes much further than just being the surface level. So that would probably be my biggest piece of advice: is build it authentically and organically, and don't try to force it.
And then your first role, like with the Toronto Raptors G League, like what was that like?
It was fun. I loved it. I was there for 3 years, and my last 2 years, we went to the championship twice. The first year we won with head coach Jerry Stackhouse, and it was also really cool to just see the team be built from the early stages in the inaugural season, and it just go from the ground up, and then have the success that they've had with developing guys within the organization. And it was really fun. I mean, the G League is a fun brand of basketball. It is definitely intense, because the G League is consistently changing, with players getting call-ups and getting different contracts, whether it's in the US or overseas. So it always keeps you on your toes. But those 3 years with the 905 were really fun and really fantastic, and set me up to continue down the path that I've been doing so far.
Like play-by-play announcing, I mean, I've talked to a lot of play-by-play announcers, like Kate Scott was telling me about just how weird it is, like, prepping for play-by-play, because it's like, it's almost like you're going for a game, because you have to prep about, okay, what are some like key talking points I can have, but once that mic starts, you kind of just have to keep rolling.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because you can prep all you want, and you might use like 10% of all the stuff you prepped for. But the thing is that you have to still prep the other 90%, because one, you don't know what 10% of that 90 or 10% of that 100% you're going to use.
Mhm.
So to try and guess and figure it out would be really difficult. But then also too, if you don't do the other 90%, you're going to be put in a situation where you need something in that 90% and you don't have it. So yeah, play by play is so interesting, because as an analyst, you prep for one, like what the team likes to do, some funky plays that they might do, be ready for different situations that the team has been previously put in, ATOs, which are after timeouts, stuff like that. So you, as an analyst, you can prep for that because you watch film, you can break it down, versus like play by play, you can do all of that, but also too, you have to know the game and also be prepared for those moments where you need that prep that you did to kind of fill some of the storyline and fill what's going on. And also, something that might have been relevant 4 games prior. And in those 4 games, it wasn't relevant. But in this 5th game, what happened 4 games ago is relevant again. So like, you need to be prepared to be able to talk about that. So yeah, it's so interesting. But I love it. So I never complain about, all the prep that goes into it, because at the end of the day, like I get paid to watch and talk about basketball. So like, is it really that bad?
Like, when you're in the middle of it, it's almost like being in a game. Like you make a mistake, you kind of have to keep going. So like, how do you handle your nerves, and how do you deal with like making mistakes on the fly?
Like in the moment when a mistake is made, if it's like really bad or very obvious, or something that's like, oh, like I should probably apologize for that. Literally just like, pardon me, correct it and move on. I think one of the probably most consistent mistakes that might be made is like, you say someone's name wrong, and you don't do it on purpose, because obviously we prep for that. But in the moment when you're saying it for the first time, it might get mixed up. So, you just correct yourself and move on. Like for me, the one thing that I love is the fact that I kind of like treat each game the way I did when I played. So it's like, you make a mistake, you got to move on to the next play. Like, this, you play sports. So you've got to just move on. You can't dwell on the mistake, because you have to continue to play the game. So that's kind of how I treat calling the game. If I make a mistake, or if I stumble on my words, or if I, try and tell a joke and my analyst doesn't think it's funny. Luckily, the 3 people that I've worked with, they've all just found my silly jokes funny. So it kind of works in my favor. People watching might not find it funny, but as long as the person laughs that I'm working with, at least then it's not just dead air and sounds bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got like, that's how I treat it. I kind of just go back to my playing days, when it's tip off, and kind of just revert back to that mentality of on to the next play. And I think that's also too where my nerves kind of get in check, is like, I might be nervous, and like now I don't really get nervous before games, which is, I mean, I don't mind it. Even if I do get nervous, I also don't mind it, because it means that I really want to do a good job. Not that not getting nervous doesn't mean that. But like, if there is a situation where I might be getting nervous, again, like I just revert back to my playing days. And once the producer says, does the count, and then says, go Meghan, like that next 48, or if I'm doing a W game, 40 minutes, because their quarters are shorter, like it's just like my mind is focused on the game, and I'm kind of just in game mode, and kind of just treat it like I used to when I played. It's just like, it's me, my broadcast partner, and everything happening within the 4 lines, and I kind of just check out everything else and don't even worry about it. So the nerves usually go away pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, your career is so heavily involved in sports, but I think it goes to show just how well sports prep you for real life situations. And I think especially being younger and having to deal with those situations of going into a game, I think like it's really beneficial for kids, because it's like you don't usually get put into those situations. And a lot of people that when they do in the future, they're kind of like, what do I do?
Yeah, for sure. I think, and if that's probably the really like tough or disappointing part about seeing, less and less girls playing sports, not just basketball, but just playing sports in general, or deciding to stop playing at, a specific age. Like right now it's what, like that 12 to 15-year-old range that girls are starting to no longer play sports or walk away from playing sports. Like if I didn't have sports growing up, I probably would one, not be in the position I am today. I too wouldn't have, the confidence and determination that I have with doing things. And really and truly everything that I do now when it comes to broadcasting is because of what I learned playing sports, playing a team sport, learning how to work together. Because even though when you watch games, people only see 2 or 3 people, with it being, the play-by-play person, the analyst, and then, it's dependent on every team and every broadcast if there's a sideline reporter or not. So you sometimes see anywhere from 2 to 5 faces, because if you have a studio show, you might have a host and an analyst in studio as well too. So you don't see the people behind the scenes. But in my opinion, the people behind the scenes are just as, if not more important than the 2 people or 3 people that are on air, because we can prep all we want for being on air, but if something is going wrong behind the scenes and the crew behind the scenes are not able to figure it out, then it affects us, because if it's something bad and we can't get on air, then we can't get on air. So I always think that the behind the scenes people are just as important, if not more, like I said, with regards to television or radio broadcasts, than the people that we see on camera. We just don't see them. But they're a huge and integral part to things happening. And sports taught me that it's not just about me, even in individual sports. Like, you might play on the tennis team in high school or college, but it's not just you. You might have a one-on-one matchup, but in order for your team to, win the national title or have success, everybody on the team needs to be successful. So you want to make sure that you're also cheering on your teammates, and you want to make sure that you're setting your teammates up for success. And broadcasting is no different. I look at play-by-play, and you're kind of I'm just the captain driving the ship. I'm just making sure that, we don't hit any icebergs, we don't hit any, dolphins or anything like that. And I'm just making sure that I'm setting up my analysts to be able to knock it out of the park, and make sure that we're all good. My job is the easy part. It's just setting them up. So playing sports taught me that, because if you don't know how to set your teammates up, then you can't really do that in the broadcasting world. So definitely learned a lot of who I am growing up playing sports, and it set me up for success in now this broadcasting career.
Yeah, and you're someone who has experience, broadcasting for the WNBA, the NBA, and the G League. Like, what do you think are kind of like the main differences between them?
I mean, the biggest one is obviously gender, but I grew up playing basketball and grew up playing, sports with guys. So for me, it's not that big of a difference, because basketball is basketball. Whether it's men's basketball or women's basketball, the game is the exact same. The rules aren't different. So that's probably the most obvious one. But like I said, I don't see that as a difference. In all honesty, like, I don't think there's a huge difference. Obviously, when you go from, the G League to the NBA, the size of guys is taken up a notch. The speed is a little bit quicker. When you're watching on TV, it might not look like that, but when you are sitting watching in person, there's definitely a difference there. I would say, obviously with the G League and NBA, and then the W games are shorter. They play 4 10-minute quarters as opposed to the 4 12-minute quarters. I would say the women's game, the easiest way to describe it is like the San Antonio Spurs are like a prime example of the WNBA, in the sense of like the way that they play. It's very fundamental. It's flashy, but it's not the flashy that, people love, with like huge lobs and dunks and stuff like that. So anyone who loves, the Spurs style of basketball most likely are huge fans of the WNBA. Like, I don't know if you saw the interview with Chene and Draymond kind of breaking down, like, if you claim to love basketball, and I'm paraphrasing because there was a lot of colorful language in it. Like, if you claim to love basketball, then you should love the W. And if you don't, like, then you really don't love basketball, because that is basketball.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, like, do you get dunks in the W? Of course, we've seen it over the course of the last handful of years. But the way that they play, like, NBA guys love the way that the WNBA players play. So if you love basketball, then it shouldn't really matter which league you're watching. In all honesty, like, I think the biggest difference for me is just that I have a different broadcast partner for each. So it's just making sure that, like, I'm matching, their style and their energy level, and making sure that I'm accommodating the way that they kind of break down the game, and not just doing a cookie cutter version and making sure it's the same for each. But like, the game is the game. So it when it comes to me calling it, it's really no different. between the three leagues that I've worked in, because at the end of the day, it's the exact same game, exact same size court. The ball goes in the hoop the same way.
Yeah.
For me, there's no difference.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of talks about that, with the WNBA, because I mean, it's a lot of, like you're saying, it's fundamental basketball. And I think because girls can't necessarily like hop as high as guys just because of biological scientific facts, you see that there's a lot more basketball IQ and there's just a lot more real basketball being played. And I think people that truly understand the game of basketball respect that more.
Yeah, no, it's no doubt. And I think, you look at, if you're a basketball purist, then you don't care if it's men or women playing. You appreciate and have a love for the game, period, whether it's college basketball or pro basketball, whether it's the NBA or WNBA or G League. Like, if you're a true basketball purist, then you love watching the game, no matter who is playing, no matter what team it is, no matter what league it is. So yeah, no, I would totally agree with you. If you really love the game and are true to the game, then you could care less which gender happens to be playing.
And what's so cool about the G League is like, it's just there's a bunch of people that are trying to like make it to the league, and I honestly feel like they're out here like working harder and hustling more than the people that are in the NBA, because these people are like, man, I just want to make it, and they're super hungry.
It's so interesting. Like, that's probably the biggest thing I love about the G League, is just watching the grind of these guys. And when they get their moment and their opportunity, it's really exciting, because like, especially when you think of the last like month and a half and the way that COVID really affected the NBA. And then you had this insurgence of G League guys getting call ups
Yeah.
because of the COVID crisis that essentially was kind of just ravaging every single NBA team at different points. But like, seeing guys get that opportunity that, unfortunate circumstances allow them to, but at the end of the day, they have to take advantage of it. And just seeing them get that opportunity and how excited they were and how happy they were, but also too, to see how excited and supportive the NBA guys they were playing with were of them and getting this opportunity. Like, that was probably, for me, one of the best parts, was seeing the NBA guys embrace these guys in these moments and really celebrate them. Has been really fun to watch. But yeah, that's probably one of the coolest points of the G League, is when you see guys put in the work from, training camp into the games, and then they get that call up and they get that opportunity. And it's so fun, because you've seen the progress and you've seen the grind that they've put in to get to that point. So yeah, probably my favorite part of the G League.
And I think, similarly talking about the WNBA, I honestly feel like it's harder for those women that want to make it to the WNBA because of the limited spots that there are. And so it's definitely a similar process in the way of like, you really got to be the best of the best. And it's hard because there's just not that many spots.
Yeah, 144 spots sounds like a lot, but it really is not. And a lot of the time, the grind that I was talking about actually happens not just over over the off season, but it happens overseas, when we don't necessarily get the avid opportunity to watch. Obviously, now with technology and the internet, things have changed, so we can watch these women overseas a lot easier than we used to. But that's where really the grind happens, is when they go in the off season overseas to play again, to get themselves better and put themselves in a position to, get that training camp invitation, or if they went from a training camp invitation the year before to getting on the roster and playing in the season. Like, that's where really the grind happens. But you're right, like 144 spots is not a lot. And selfishly, I would like to see more teams in the league, because that means more of these amazing athletes get an opportunity to play in the WNBA. So I'm hoping that Commissioner Engelbert starts the expansion process a lot quicker and a lot sooner than she may want to. But and that's just me selfishly as a W fan. But I know a lot of fans would like to see, expansion happen, because when you see the talent that there is, and now we're seeing it with Athletes Unlimited playing right now, and people who were not in the W playing. And if not for AU, they might have been overseas and we might not have heard of them, and teams might not have been able to get looks. So you can tell that there's a lot of talent on the women's side, and there's just not a lot of opportunity to be on these rosters. So selfishly, as a W fan, I would like to see expansion happen.
Yeah, and I'm from the Bay Area, and there's supposed to be, talks of like a team here in Oakland, and I think that'd be awesome, especially because California itself is such a big basketball state. We have 4 NBA teams. I think it's time, and Oakland's not being used anymore. Everything's pulling off, so I think it'd be perfect to place a WNBA team there.
Hey, I think Oakland would work. Houston will work because we know what they were able to do with the Comets. There's so many hubs throughout the entire country that could totally work for a W team. And you've seen it probably on social media. I know I've seen it on social media. Like, the fans want it. And it's not just like current WNBA fans with WNBA teams in their cities. It's fans of the WNBA who watch the W, who don't have a team in their city, and they want the team. So there's definitely fan love for it and fan base for it, for sure.
And just lastly, what advice do you have for girls looking to pursue a career in broadcasting?
Do it. Like, seriously, as simplistic as that is for advice, like, do it. If you want to be in broadcasting, no matter what area of broadcasting, if you want to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, if you want to run a network, like, who cares what it is? Like, go after it and do it. Because we need more women in broadcasting and in sports broadcasting. Like, I'm not even just talking sports, like broadcasting, period. We need more women in decision-making, power seats. We need more women at the table to have these conversations, because at the end of the day, like, for me, the biggest thing is you can't necessarily tell these stories if you don't have people who look like the story product telling the stories. So the more we can have, women and women of minorities in broadcasting, in decision-making positions, I think it's going to continue to open up the world for the stories to be told, and stories that aren't being told to be told. But to any young girl who wants to get into broadcasting or sports broadcasting, like, go and do it, get after it without question. Like, for me, I love it. Like, if you had to ask me, like, oh, if you weren't broadcasting, like, what would you be doing? I have no answer for you. I'd probably be living with my parents. Like, I have no clue what I would be doing if I was not working in broadcasting, and if I wasn't working in sports how I am. Like, I don't know what I would be doing, because this is my plan A, B, C, D through the entire alphabet. Like, this is what I want to do.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.